Next up, we have what is definitely going to be one of the great highlights of our program. It's a panel on AI that we've called Musings on AI. We've got 5 great panelists and an awesome moderator as well. It's my pleasure to introduce them all to you. First up is Tasha McCauley. Tasha is a technology entrepreneur living in Los Angeles. Her current work with GeoSim Systems centers around a new technology that produces high-resolution, fully interactive virtual models of cities. This novel approach to reality capture yields the most detailed VR environments ever created out of data gathered from the real world. Prior to her involvement with GeoSim, she co-founded Fellow Robotics, a robotics company based at NASA's Research Park in Silicon Valley, and she was formerly on the faculty of Singularity University, where she taught students about robotics and was director of the Autodesk Innovation Lab. Please welcome Tasha McCauley. Jan Leike is next. He has a PhD in theoretical reinforcement learning from the Australian National University, where he worked with Marcus Hutter. After earning his PhD, he joined the Future of Humanity Institute at the University of Oxford. He was a research scientist at DeepMind, and he is a research scientist at DeepMind presently, and he is working on technical AI safety. Please welcome Jan Leike. Owen Cotton-Barratt is next. Owen has a PhD in mathematics from the University of Oxford, and he is a research fellow at the Future of Humanity Institute. Please welcome back Owen Cotton-Barratt. Next up is Helen Toner. She is a senior research analyst at the Open Philanthropy Project. Her work focuses on policy, governance, and strategy issues related to progress in artificial intelligence across domains including geopolitics, national security, public policy, and AI safety. Before joining Open Philanthropy, she studied chemical engineering and Arabic at the University of Melbourne. While studying, she led EA Melbourne, worked at a finance startup called Vesperum Capital, and interned with the Boston Consulting Group. In her free time, she enjoys Renaissance polyphony, and learning how to dance. Please welcome Helen Toner. Dario Amodei is next. He is the team lead for safety research at OpenAI. Previously, he worked at Google and Baidu. He is the co-author of Concrete Problems in AI Safety, which explores practical issues in making modern machine learning systems behave in a safe and reliable manner, and also of deep reinforcement learning from human preferences, which develops a method for learning complex, human-determined goals. He sits on the board of the Partnership for AI, a nonprofit industry partnership dedicated to ensuring AI technologies benefit society. Prior to working on AI safety, he also helped lead the project that developed Baidu's Deep Speech 2, a human-level speech recognition system, which was named one of 10 breakthrough technologies of 2016 by MIT Technology Review. Please welcome Dario Amodei. And finally, to moderate this outstanding panel, Michael Page. He is currently working on AI strategy. Before that, he earned to give as a lawyer in Washington, D.C. from 2012 to 2015. He then advised CEA's 2016 restructuring, during which time he managed several research-related teams. Please welcome Michael Page.
All right. Is this thing working? OK, so the theme of this panel is basically going to be stuff relating to advanced AI that I would find interesting to talk about with this crowd, and hopefully that you would also find interesting. I'm hoping this will be a fairly casual back and forth. I'll ask some questions. Not everybody needs to answer every question, so feel free just to pipe in if you have a particularly interesting answer to the question that I'm asking. And also, I just learned that Game of Thrones started 10 minutes ago, so thanks for coming here instead of tuning in. So when I first heard about this panel idea, it was, I think, tentatively dubbed the AI safety panel. And I wasn't really sure what that meant. People use the term AI safety in different ways. There are a lot of different issues relating to AI that this crowd might care about. So I thought I'd begin with a terminological question. I hear a lot of terms thrown around in this space. You have AI safety, the control problem, the alignment problem, AI strategy, AI policy, the deployment problem. What terms do you guys like or not like?
So I guess first to state an obvious point, I think obviously the research that's being done is much more important than the specific terms that we use to describe it. That said, of the things Michael has mentioned, I mean, in my own experience, we called our paper "Concrete Problems in AI Safety" because AI safety happened to be the term that people were most familiar with. If we said alignment or control, people would have thought we were talking about something kind of weird and different. I'm not really a fan of rebranding. I think AI safety is a valid area, and we should argue for its validity directly. So it's the term I typically tend to use, but I think we shouldn't care that much about terms. And when people use other terms, it doesn't bother me. On the last two terms, AI policy and AI strategy, I think these are important areas that are kind of distinct from AI safety, and either term sounds fine to me.
Yeah, I just note that in terms of describing types of AI systems, some terms get thrown around like AGI, so artificial general intelligence, superintelligence, and so on. I found it really useful in discussing policy and strategy issues in this space to instead talk about transformative AI, which I guess is very roughly defined as a system or a set of systems that has an impact comparable in size to the Industrial Revolution. And we've just found this really helpful to, when you're not focusing on the technical details of building a system like that, when you're instead focusing on what the policy responses should be. It's been really good to get away from debates of, well, does it need to do everything a human can do exactly as well as a human, or can it just be most things, and does it need to be much better than it gets you free of all of that stuff. So we found transformative AI to be a useful, if rough, concept to work with.
I like transformative AI. I also like the term AI alignment. I think we're going for extremely reliable agent design and value learning, and I think the idea of alignment with human values is useful to keep in mind, or at least as a terminology for sort of describing what the core focus of AI safety work might be. AI safety and the control problem both have the tendency to maybe conjure up the idea of an adversary or a captive that you might need to control, which I think are useful perspectives to take. But focusing on the alignment of values is nice when talking about the work that's being done, and also probably instills a little less fear in people.
So I use the term technical AI safety to describe my work. I'm not quite happy with this term because it kind of has this implicit connotation that like other AI work is somehow unsafe, which is not true. So the other terms that are floating around, like alignment, I think alignment doesn't quite capture some of the safety problems that we think about, like particular robustness problems. Although like some people use the word to mean that. Control problem is kind of a bit difficult because there's a lot of technical control problems out there, so that gets confusing. I think I agree with Dario that it's like the precise term we use is not that important, but I also think that we're kind of stuck with AI safety because it's kind of established and it's really hard to change it.
Anything to add?
Oh, I could be a bit of a killjoy and say, I think the reason, to some extent, that there are a lot of terms is that actually there are reasons to want multiple terms. Like, it's a big, complex world. There's a lot of actually different concepts that we might want to be pointing to. Mm-hmm. And some of the time we might care about AGI, and then some other times we might be thinking, what are the consequences of this? And then the notion of transformative AI is actually more useful. So although there's something nice about being able to stick to a small number of terms, I think sometimes you want a new concept, and then it's good to actually reach for the new concept rather than just use the one that we've been building up.
Cool, thanks. Okay, I want to talk a bit about AI development, both where we've been and where we might be going. So looking at, say, the past year, are there particular developments in AI that have most excited you?
So if I were to point to two areas, and these are things that are not so much things that made big splashes, but I think research areas that are starting to blossom and that I think should be watched. we're starting to see good progress on two areas that I'd call have been called like hierarchical reinforcement learning and meta learning. So meta learning is the idea that you kind of learn to learn. So often we experiment with different algorithms in, say, reinforcement learning, and we different researchers try different techniques for how to learn to play a game. Meta learning says, no, instead, maybe you should train an agent where an episode of the agent is the process of learning to play a game from start to finish. And then you train it on 1,000 games, running each game from start to finish, knowing nothing to fully learning the game 1,000 times. Then it learns the process of learning the game. And if you give it 1,001th game, then it will learn well on that game as well. The results so far on that are very preliminary and have been at the algorithmic level, but I think this is something to watch. Another area is I've seen a lot of stuff on hierarchical reinforcement learning, which is basically setting sub-goals. So if I'm a human, I'm walking around, if I think about my day, I think, well, I'm going to get up, I'm going to drive to work, then I'm going to use my computer at work, then I'm going to start writing this paper. I'm thinking at a very high level about my tasks, and our current reinforcement learning systems don't really do that, but work from OpenAI and DeepMind and others is starting to think about that. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the development a couple of days ago where an OpenAI bot beat the world champion at Dota, which is a popular esports game, Dota 2. In kind of 1v1 mini game, so we're shooting for the full game after that. But that was a pretty exciting recent thing.
So I guess there's also so there's two things that I found pretty interesting recently that came out. So one is the neural machine translation that came out of Google Brain, where you actually train neural networks to translate from one language to another. And the other thing was AlphaGo and AlphaGo Master, the fact that you can actually train neural networks to understand Go better than humans, especially given all the other parts that went into it. So it's not just deep learning. But I think on a high level, one of the things that we learn from it is that deep learning actually scales really well, and we can put it on really big problems, and it will continue to improve. And I think that's quite interesting.
Yeah, I agree with all of Jan's choices as well.
Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I guess I just somewhat echo Dario in saying that I was interested to see a few developments in the past year of AI systems doing well on games that were not the kinds of games that AI has worked well for in the past. So not games where all information about what's happening about the game, what's happening in the game is available to both players at all times. So we had a bot, a bot, doing really well at the World Series of Poker, I think in a specific variation of poker, but still that was a kind of development that hasn't really been seen before.
I also agree. Sorry, I was going to say I agree with Jan's point about AlphaGo, and also it was very interesting that it managed to beat, the best player in the world a year ago, and within 1 year it was able to beat, the top 50 players in the world. It was just an enormous leap in 1 year.
Mm-hmm. Looking forward, so let's say the next 5 years, are there particular things that you think AIs might do in the world that really excite you, that you think might not be on the radars of most of the people in this room?
So I think we're going to make a lot of progress on manipulation by robotic systems. So everything you would imagine kind of a...
You mean physical manipulation of objects?
Physical manipulation of objects, not psychological manipulation of humans, or hopefully not. So just anything that you might expect a household robot to do, like picking things up, or moving things, or moving furniture. I don't know about things actually being done in physical robots and actual commercialization happening, because actually those have very long timescales that are often much longer than the timescales of the fundamental technologies needed to develop them. But at least in simulation and in principle, demonstrations of transfer of these things to actual physical robots, I think we'll make a lot of progress on that in the next 5 years, and perhaps even the next 2 or 3 years. I expect that area to progress very quickly. Another area where I expect to see a lot of progress to some extent, unfortunately, is the use of reinforcement learning in kind of like internet environments or internet domains. So people will begin to use advanced machine learning to conduct both attack and defense of cyber systems. So there may start to be kind of a cat and mouse game or an arms race between the attackers and the defenders. As we've seen in the last year, cyber attacks already have a huge impact on the world. So well short of AGI happening, this is something that could be, if not catastrophic or existential, could be a near-term application of AI that really has some effects on the world, not all of which may be positive. And then finally, this stuff on meta learning that I mentioned, I expect that this, people often discuss, big weakness of deep learning is that it needs a lot of data to learn, and unreasonably more data than is needed for humans. I think meta learning is going to progress, and a few years from now, even a couple years from now, no one's going to be able to say that anymore.
I think, so taking this in a bit of another direction, I think one thing that I'm pretty excited about is StarCraft. So you might have heard, like, DeepMind recently released research framework environment for other people to work on StarCraft 2. And I'd be very curious to see when we can beat the top pros on StarCraft 2 from just agents playing from the raw pixel input. And the reason why it's so hard to do this is that StarCraft kind of requires you to do long-term planning and like kind of hierarchical decision-making, like of the kind that Dario kind of alluded to earlier. And also, like, the action space in StarCraft is very complicated and compositional because you're selecting your units and then you're giving actions as you're selecting an action, and then you're telling it where to execute that action. So that's pretty complicated for these reasons, and a lot of very smart people are trying to crack that problem.
Quick question for Jan. Do you think we'll beat StarCraft 2 or Dota 5v5 first?
I'd expect StarCraft first. I think Dota is harder.
Okay. Dario, do you
maybe
agree?
OpenAI will prove us wrong. I don't know.
It's implicitly a loaded question because DeepMind is working on StarCraft and we're working on Dota, and I don't think either is going to work on the other. So I guess no comment.
It's an arms race.
I guess something which seems maybe important in terms of practical implications from developments over the next few years is exactly things where it doesn't need new physical manipulators to have an impact. And that might come from things which are to do with generating media. There's been some discussion of, like, we already have some ability to spoof audio. You can put words into the voice of an arbitrary person. And if we can spoof stronger videos, or maybe we'll have things relating to, like maybe just text chat is going to get a lot better.
I guess one thing I'm kind of hoping to see on Owen's point about fake videos and fake audio, I think a number of people are worried about effects that could have if people are taken in by, falsified audio or video from, politicians or celebrities making statements they didn't make. One thing I would love to see is for someone to make a really great viral video with, famous people saying and doing things they obviously didn't say or do. I would love to see that as a way to, spread around the idea that you shouldn't trust video or audio, unless it has certain qualities or whatever the technical requirements imply. That's something, someone in the audience wants to build that, I'd be happy about that.
So, anything to add, Tasha? So one thing we talk a lot about in this community is the risks associated with developing advanced AI. But obviously, there are also a lot of benefits associated with developing advanced AI. So this is a bit of a cheeky question, but one way of putting it is, are y'all more concerned about developing advanced AI or not developing advanced AI?
I think I'm deeply concerned about both. On the not developing advanced AI, one observation you can make is that modern society, and particularly society with nuclear weapons, has only been around for about 70 years. There have been a lot of close calls since then, and things seem to be getting worse. If I look at kind of the world and geopolitics in the last few years, China's rising. There's a lot of unrest in the Western world, a lot of very destructive nationalism. We're developing biological technologies very quickly. It's not entirely clear to me that civilization is compatible with digital communication. It has really some subtle corrosive effects. So every year that passes is a danger that we face. And although AI has a number of dangers, actually I think if we never build AI, if we don't build AI for 100 years or 200 years, I'm very worried about whether civilization will actually survive. Of course, on the other hand, I work on AI safety, and so I'm very concerned that transformative AI is very powerful, and that bad things could happen either because of safety or alignment problems, or because there's a concentration of power in the hands of the wrong people, the wrong governments who control AI. So I think it's terrifying in all directions, but not building AI isn't an option, because I don't think civilization is safe.
I guess I think I'm more concerned about building advanced AI, but that's just because I don't think we will not build advanced AI. That doesn't seem on the table, so I think we should be focusing the attention on making sure that building goes right.
I think I'm more concerned with not building AI. I think AI has really great potential to help us solve all the problems that people in the room here care about, like global poverty and animal suffering and so on, and plus possibly new problems that we don't really think about yet. But as any new powerful technology, you have to be wise about deploying it and be careful and really think about all the things that can go wrong. And in a way, this is kind of what technical AI safety is one aspect of this. Of course, there's similar questions in AI policy and AI strategy, and I think we should really take these seriously.
Just to be clear, everything Jan said was meant to be implicit in what I said. So though it sounded like we disagreed, I don't think we do.
Yeah, I don't think we do. No.
I agree with Owen's, point that we don't really have a choice about whether or not to be concerned about advanced AI. I think it's definitely coming. I tend to think it's more useful to take an optimistic approach and then just exercise caution when working toward an optimistic vision. One thing about humans, our biological systems are so evolved to understand events in the real world and adapt to them. And in this case, I was actually just watching a talk the other day where Elon Musk was describing how we have double exponentials here. We have the exponential change in hardware development with respect to advancing in AI, and then we have exponential change in the software talent. And even when just dealing with a single exponential, our intuitive systems are not very good at predicting, and certainly in the case of double exponentials, we're not going to be able to make proper predictions. And also, I think whatever does happen, we should just be expecting that it's going to be a shock one way or another, and we're not very well able to adapt to it.
I liked the point about having optimistic visions. I think that if we do have, as a society, more of an optimistic vision of what a world might look like with a great transformative AI, that can help us get on board with building it together.
I want to segue from your Elon Musk comment. So there's been a lot of drama in the news recently between Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg about when and how AI will kill us. Are y'all on Team Musk or Team Zuckerberg?
We don't have our T-shirts.
I ordered them, but they didn't make it in time.
Shoot.
And Dario, you're welcome to take a pass on this if you want.
I think it depends on.
I'm happy to answer it. I mean, I do in fact work for Elon Musk. I mean, so I guess I'm on Team Musk in that sense. But I think my higher level comment on things like this is my kind of own experience is at the level of trying to work on specific AI safety research ideas. And I think that while there's a lot one could say on both sides about this, I actually think it's probably good to pay less attention to these kind of like Twitter fights between extremely high status people. I think for many people it's just kind of an excuse to get interested in gossip and fixate on people who are very very high status. I mean some people worry. They say, oh, Elon is saying these unreasonable things, like this will turn people off of AI safety, and maybe that's a little true. But I've never talked to someone who said, oh, I got interested in AI safety, because of this tweet Elon Musk sent, or like, I was turned off of AI safety because of this tweet Elon Musk sent. I mean, when I talk to people, when I'm trying to recruit people, it ends up being about the research, the quality of the research, the technical topics, and so forth.
Yeah. So, sorry.
I mean, I guess I want to contradict that just a little, in the sense that I don't know. I think I've heard from some people who care about AI safety that maybe Elon doesn't say things in the most nuanced way, but like at least he's raising awareness and getting it on the radar of policymakers, and like surely that's good, right? And I guess I just feel a little cautious, having been in a couple of different situations where policymakers and technical researchers are brought together, and there's a sort of rough dynamic in the room of the policymakers saying, oh, like I hear this thing is really scary. I see all these news articles with Terminator pictures on the top. Like, should we be scared? And the technical researchers put all their effort into saying, no, it's not dangerous. It's a long way away. Musk is crazy. Don't listen to him. Don't worry about AI safety. It's all fine. Which I think is not a conversation that would have happened if maybe if there'd been less coverage in the media, or if the coverage had been less sensationalistic. So I guess I agree with the bulk of what Dario said, but that's just an extra note that I would add.
Yeah. So AI safety is kind of a young field. The public conversation around it is still kind of shaping, and my impression is that the kind of Zuckerberg-Musk debate is kind of polarizing it in an unhelpful way, that like you're now forced to be either Camp Zuckerberg or Camp Musk, and there like it's good points on both sides, and like people should think about the short-term consequences, and they should also think about the long-term consequences about AI. Yeah. I think more generally, I think we should work towards improving the public debate around it, and like as Helen said, like please have less Terminator pictures.
My favorite anecdote about this is Nate Soares of Miri being quoted in an article about AI risk, saying how much he hated it being quoted in articles with Terminator pictures, and that article had a Terminator picture in it.
Tasha?
I was just going to say, I mean, I was sort of curious about when you were describing polarizing people on one side or the other. I heard a term used by Joshua Fox, who I think used to be at Miri. He was describing himself not as a techno-pessimist or a techno-optimist, but like a techno-volatilist, sort of saying that any exponentially powerful technology is going to have extreme benefits or extreme risks one way or another, and that you might just have to recognize that it's either on the side of extreme pessimism or optimism. And I guess we'll sort of get to a question about optimism, but sort of curious where you fall.
So also, Jan, you mentioned something about improving the public debate. What is it about the way that EAs, people in this community, talk about AI development or AI safety that most annoys all of you? If you could, fix something about the way that conversation is going on, what would you fix?
I think, something I would love to see is more science journalism around AI from people who really understand the subject matter. Because there's just a lot of uninformed stuff out there, and there's very little really informed stuff out there. So maybe that's a good opportunity for people in this room to kind of look into that. I don't know.
So from the EA community in particular, I think there's a lot of things the EA community gets right about AI that no one else gets right. But one thing that I'd like to see less of is that there's a particular model I often see from not all, but some people in EA, which is sort of that there's like two progress bars, and one of them is the like AI capabilities project progress bar, and the other is the AI safety progress bar. And if the AI capabilities progress bar reaches the end before the AI safety progress bar, then we all die. And if the AI safety progress bar reaches the end first, then it's great. I think this model is kind of dangerous because I think it's inaccurate, and it really drives kind of the impression among AI researchers that AI safety people think their work is evil or are trying to hold back their work, and I think that actually does push against acceptance. The reason I think it's not right is, at least in my own experience, a lot of the safety work I do is made possible by recent advances in capabilities work. A lot of the safety work I do also allows you to do capabilities work in different ways that's maybe safety compatible. I also think that relating to AGI in particular, some of the safety work that we end up doing with respect to AGI, a lot of it may only be possible within the last 2 or 3 years before AGI. So there's a lot of intertwinement between these two things. And while it's true that I think we should work on safety research right away. We shouldn't wait until we're going to build AGI tomorrow, and that's why I'm working on it now. I think we should maybe be less extreme and chill a little bit about being scared about the next breakthrough in capabilities. I mean, it's possible that we will have a hard time doing all the safety research at the end, but there's actually a limited amount that we may be able to do early on. So the situation is just not as binary, and I think that frame polarizes AI researchers against AI safety researchers, and I think that's unhelpful.
I agree with the polarization issue there, although I do think often there's a germ of truth in simple models, and the idea that having more safety research is pretty good, particularly relative to different points on the capability track, is the germ of truth there, and it's worth acknowledging that as well. But you can frame it in a way that doesn't make people pursuing AI research sound evil.
Yes.
And ultimately, AI safety and AI research are not separate things, right? They're very much it's all just AI research.
That hasn't always been the case, correct? I mean, and that could be something that people in this community maybe haven't quite caught up to.
I mean, yeah, I think I see this as a kind of open question, and as a question where reasonable people can disagree to what extent research on AI safety is going to exclusively look like the kind of work that Dario and Jan do, which is really machine learning based. It seems plausible to me that all of the AI safety work that needs to be done will look like that. As a non-expert in the technical safety, a non-expert in any of this, it also seems plausible to me that the more kind of fundamental, philosophical, mathematical foundations also need to be explored. I'm sure others in this panel have views on this question, but I see it. I think perhaps the EA community is not yet as familiar with the machine learning-based research that is being done. But I, for one, at least, am not yet completely confident that will be the only type of relevant work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, just to be clear, I'm a big fan of the work that Miri is doing, and I think it's great that they're doing it. But for me, that's still AI.
Yep. Relatedly, go ahead, Owen.
Just something else that I always annoys me a little bit when I see people talking, using overly simplistic framings about AI, and I think this does happen in the EA community. I think it happens a lot outside the EA community as well, but I think that we want to promote deep understanding about this, and so we should try and hold ourselves to higher standards, perhaps, than outside. And that means not framing it as super intelligence just means all-powerful. Not framing it as it's binary, either the AI is going to destroy the world or everything's going to be great. This gets back to the techno-volatilist perspective.
And related to that question, if you could instill one AI-related meme in the EA community, what would it be? And so is there a pithy one-liner that people here could take home as the thing they got out of this conference? And maybe no is the answer.
Does it have to be one line?
No.
I can do 2 lines.
Do 2 lines.
All right. I think one kind of implicit assumption that I often encounter is that people have this mental model that the way we'll build powerful artificial intelligence is that somebody builds an initial system, a kind of seed AI, and then it just ends up self-improving very quickly and become super intelligent or something. I think this is like a very misleading model. I don't think this is likely how it's going to happen, and also like it's not an implicit assumption you should be using.
Maybe don't anthropomorphize. It's very useful to work towards not thinking of AI as a human. But it's also an interesting question of terminology as well, because we tend to use even the term artificial intelligence gives people an anthropomorphic vision of what might happen, and it's not maybe as catchy to say a utility function maximizer. People might not really know what you're talking about, but that type of language is probably more descriptive of what AI is. So maybe just finding ways to anthropomorphize less.
So here's a one-liner. AI doesn't have to learn all of human morality. So this is something actually that even at this point Miri agrees with, but there's some writing in the past, a lot of writing in the past that I think people are still anchored to in many ways. So what I mean by that in particular is that I think the things we would want from an AGI are to kind of stabilize the world, to end material scarcity, to give us control over our own biology, maybe to resolve international conflicts. We don't want, or I think need to kind of build a system, at least not build a system ourselves, that is a sovereign and kind of runs the world for the indefinite future and controls the entire light cone. So of course you still need to know a lot of things about human values, but I still often run into people who are kind of thinking about this problem in a way that I think is actually harder than we probably need to solve.
I guess one idea, not a one-liner, but it's a one-liner once I explain it. One idea I'd like to seed that already gets talked about some is interaction risk. So EAs often tend to think about accident risk and misuse risk, where accident risk might be the risk of misalignment, the risk of things going wrong, and it's kind of on the technical side. Is the system designed correctly by the AI researchers? And then the misuse risk would be more on the geopolitical side. How will it be used? Will it be used by dictators to oppress their people? Will Kim Jong-un get an AGI? And I think something we think could be important, and we would love to see more people thinking about, is interaction risk, which could be the interaction between how the system is designed and what the geopolitical situation is. So is the system, are the really advanced systems that are designed one day, are they designed in a context that is peaceful, that is internationally stable, where the designers feel like they can take extra time to get safety right, to run double checks, or is it designed in some kind of race situation or something like that? So my one-liner that is now a two-worder is interaction risk.
There's a TV show called The Expanse that is basically about interaction risk, although it's not about AI, it's about another powerful technology.
I guess here's my one-liner. We don't yet know all the answers, but we also don't yet know the important questions. I think that if you take a frame of like this progress bar thing, it's implicitly assuming that we know what the questions are. It's how do we build safety into our AIs in a way which implies that safety is a separable thing. And I just think that might well be false. And I think that almost every other question that we ask might not turn out to be the important one.
There's been a lot of discussion online for a long time within this community about how hard the control or the alignment problem is, and that's something that I know Dario and Jan work directly on, and some of the rest of you less directly. I'm kind of curious who on this panel, relative to the others, thinks it'll be most difficult, and who on this panel, relative to the others, thinks it'll be least difficult, and I want you two to kind of duke it out. So what's the most efficient way of figuring out who thinks it'll be most and least difficult?
I mostly want to opt out and let the others argue and then decide what I think at the end.
So maybe let's have a game where put your hand high if you think it'll be relatively difficult, and low if you think it'll be relatively easy, and let's just see where hands are. I don't know what you're doing, Owen.
Low is easy.
I'm indicating that I think there's I have a lot of uncertainty about this. I have a range of things that I think are plausible. I take I'm kind of not answering your question.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to nominate Dario for the "it'll be easy" viewpoint.
All right. I will take a go at this. So first of all, I don't know. The problem could be really easy. It could be really hard. That's a reason to work on it early. I am relatively optimistic, though no one should take this as a reason to stop caring about AI safety. Even if there were only a 5% risk that something catastrophic would happen to the world because of it, that would be well worth much more effort than the world is putting into it. The effort of all the people in this room and many others. It's still just ridiculously underallocated. That said, one reason or two reasons I might have for believing that it might not be all that hard. The first is the one I just said before, that I think we may not need to learn all of kind of human morality and build a sovereign and basically build something that decides what the best way to set up human society is. That problem sounds really hard. We may just need to build artifacts that perform particular engineering tasks for us in order to put the world in a better place. Now, they're very hard engineering tasks that we don't currently know how to do, and so the problem is still hard because you may still have to do large searches over difficult strategies. But it's not nearly as hard as if you look at the early writings of Miri 10 years ago. People suspected that it would be. So that's one thing. And the second thing is I would point out a lot about the meta learning thing I said before, where a lot of the time we're finding that it is often more efficient, rather than developing an algorithm to understand how something works in a fundamental philosophical sense. Often that isn't possible, or maybe there is no fundamentally best algorithm for doing something. So I often suspect this about decision theories, where there are a bunch of different decision theories that each has different pluses and minuses, and people argue about the merits of them and think about ways that catastrophic things could happen depending on which decision theory you use. And I think a possible way around this is just to have an AI learn these concepts, and maybe the concepts are inherently fuzzy, just like it took neural nets to tell the difference between objects when the differences between those objects are inherently fuzzy. We may be able to learn safety concepts that way. And a lot of the concerns about safety are, well, there are all these edge cases, right? What if we, how do we make a thing that makes paper clips? And strangely, it may actually be the case that not trying to solve the problem directly and taking one step of abstraction up may allow us to solve it. At the same time, there are still worries that we may not have enough of that kind of data. We may not have the right models to do it. So even if that's right, then there's still many ways in which we could have systems that are very capable, but that manage to be dangerous in ways that we can't easily detect. So I don't really know for sure, but those are some reasons for optimism, at least.
Who wants to take the hard viewpoint?
I would want to add something to Dario's points, if that's okay.
Sure.
I'm like on the optimistic side, and I think one other point that makes me kind of optimistic is that I see more and more just like traditional machine learning researchers starting to think about safety problems. So, for example, there was people at DeepMind who started to work on safe exploration, kind of unrelated to our technical AI safety team, just because they realized that this comes up in their day-to-day work, and they just have to solve this problem. And I expect as machine learning is being applied to more and more problems, that this is going to happen more and more, and like more and more people kind of naturally start looking at AI safety problems and trying to solve them. I think that's a great thing. And
Okay, I'll try and give a view for why it might be hard, or why, like, the thing that makes me personally think it's hard is just that some of the people, like, that are the smartest people I know and have looked into this a bunch, think it might be pretty hard. So I think that the Paul Cristiano has what looks to me the closest to an approach which, or the outline of an approach which gets you to safety that he lays out in his blog on AI alignment, and he's not sure if it's will work. And when I read it, I think actually this looks pretty plausible, but he's spent a lot more time thinking about it than I have, and he's not sure. And Wade Dye, who is extremely smart and has also spent a bunch of time thinking about this, thinks it probably won't work.
So I work with Paul Cristiano, and I'd probably say that he's probably about as pessimistic or optimistic as I am, and probably for similar reasons. So you know, I mean, I don't. Yeah, I don't have exact answers here, but we've talked a lot, and we have kind of similar views on what will be hard and what won't be hard. And his agenda kind of states things in a different way, but I think one of his themes is similar to the thing I said, which is, you know, he wrote a post about corrigibility in particular, where it's like, you know, there's all these paradoxes with, you know, if you try algorithms for corrigibility, and maybe it isn't that hard to learn the concept of corrigibility and learn the concept of honesty, and these are fuzzy concepts, and so if you kind of try and define them to, you know, like a rule-based system or a very simple machine learning system, they don't make a lot of sense, but neither do other advanced non-safety related concepts. That said, I mean, to give an object level argument about why things might be hard, and kind of not contradict but supplement what I said before, you know, people talk a lot about value alignment and learning the right objective functions. I think we're just going to have a lot of very mundane problems with, you know, you're developing a self-driving car. You know, the training data differs from the test data. You know, you put it in the real world, it doesn't do the right thing, and if it screws up, it kills someone. With very powerful AI, if you're trying to, you know, make breakthroughs in biology, if you're trying to resolve international conflict, messing up could kill a lot of people. I can even think of scenarios where it could kill everyone, and there's probably a lot of those scenarios. We'll be dealing with a very new technology, so to me, that's one way that catastrophe could happen.
Is Nate Suarez in the audience? All right, well, ask him later. What is the most important problem in AI, and we'll say AI from like an altruistic perspective, that no one or almost no one is working on?
I think one kind of big question that puzzles me is like, what do we do when we get there? Like, say we build AGI, then what? And this is kind of an important question, right? And this is also something that like we as a society have to figure out. And of course, like AGI might be a long way away, but I think it makes sense to kind of think about this question early and kind of take all the like the holistic perspective about our society. Like, what does it mean for government? What does it mean? Like, how are we going to structure society? What are we going to do for work? Or what is it going to look like?
Do you have an idea of how to approach that problem, though?
I don't know. I feel like I have the wrong background to really tackle this question. Like, I'm a computer scientist and mathematician by training.
I mean, you know, this is the kind of work that Alan Dafoe at Yale and Oxford is working on. I think, Paige, you're working on it some as well, is that right? Mm-hmm. And yeah, so I would echo Jan that this is absolutely something I would love to see more work on as well.
I would, I'd add agreement to that as well. You know, we've been calling this AI strategy or AI policy. I think it relates to what Helen said with interaction risk. Just the idea that, you know, suppose on one hand, suppose we succeed in making an AI system safe, it's still very powerful, and it could still lead to kind of very sharp discontinuities in who controls what, could upset the geopolitical balance of power. I think that's pretty scary. People tend not to think about it because they think about safety, but I think we should act as if we're likely to succeed. So if we solve safety, then we'll have to face this problem, and so we should think about this problem ahead of time as well. It's no good to solve the safety problem if we just totally you know, don't think about this problem as well.
All right, we have about 45 seconds left. So I imagine a lot of the people here are thinking about whether they should get involved with AI in some way. Any advice on how they should even think about that question?
Think about AI less as a black box. Like, actually think about what you expect it will look like. And if you feel like that's kind of juicy to you and you can maybe make some progress on that and you can add novel thoughts, that might be a good sign that you can make progress on some facet of this.
Yeah, I would say in the spirit of Will's opening talk for this weekend, which talked about the portfolio approach to choosing what to work on and thinking about, you know, the EA community or, you know, the world or the AI research community as a portfolio and adding the best thing that you can to that portfolio. I would just, you know, put in a vote for thinking about what interests you and what your strengths are, and following that, because AI is a gigantic space. There's technical research, there's policy research, you know, all of the organizations working on this need operations support. There's all kinds of other ways that you could be helpful, and you're likely to be most helpful if you're working on something that you're good at and that you're interested in. So I would advocate for thinking more about that and a little less about trying to figure out what the absolutely most important aspect is.
Any parting thoughts? Great. Well, that's it. We're out of time. Thank you, guys.